for me heartbreaking when you see a big flood coming in. And the flood is actually not just in one specific area in Nile Basin. You can look at, go all the way to the upstream in Lake Victoria. You will see a lot of issues there as well, all the way down. And recently we saw that, you can see from this news, 800,000 Kenyans were affected with this. Again, to make things worse, not just flood, Eastern African actually faced a triple threat in a way of COVID-19, locust. So all these combination even make it more hard for people really to cope with this. As I said, this is not just in one place. You can go all the way downstream to Egypt. The flood is there again. Obviously, you have seen some of the news from Sudan. There is a lot of people who are, affected by this, and this is huge. But this doesn't mean that we cannot do anything about it. I argue that we can actually do a lot about this to make things better for everyone within the Nile Basin. One of the things that we need to know is the Nile Basin complexity and challenge are not unique. In fact, we have an article at whyAspire.info. We mentioned some of the experience of others. In this case, we looked at Colorado River Basin, the Columbia River, or even South America with the dam of Itapu. Later on, you will hear from Dr. Mohammed, who is an expert in Colorado River Basin, at least from that example. But what we need to remember is this is not a new, or this is not unique for the Nile Basin. This is everywhere throughout the country. One of the things for me that it actually gives me a little bit of hope, and there's a lot we can do, is that basin resource optimization using explicit rule approach. This is a new research, and it's actually from one of my partner, from Dr. Edo Abraham from Technical University of Delft. He was gracious enough to give me some of his results. It's under review still, but I found this study very interesting. The reason is what they did was they look at, and this is for the 3 countries. So it could be expanded for all the 11 countries, but this is just for the 3 countries. So what they look at is they build a model that has explicit rule-based approach of different criteria. And the first thing they look was flow of information. When they look at the flow of information, so flow of information in a way of, for example, how much water is going to be released from upstream countries like Ethiopia, then Sudan, and back to all the way to Egypt. What they found out is actually there's a lot you could gain by just having this flow of information. In a decision science, what they call is that the expected value of a perfect information. What it means is how much are you willing to pay for that perfect information. So if you have this flow of information, their research shows that all 3 countries are better off. That's one of them. Then they look also trade information. When they look at on trade information, what they found out is that in addition to the flow information, this was allowed to get a benefit for all the 3 countries. Trade information is what? Sometimes it could be what kind of investment you are going to make. Is that agriculture? What type of agriculture? So this will allow you to focus or specialize on what you produce. Which means at the big picture is that Ethiopian farmers, which are close there to the border, they don't have to produce something which is exactly the same across the border, or in Egypt. What they found out is if you have this trade information, you are going to diversify, specialized on some other things that benefit everybody else. That's very interesting. The last scenario they look, and this is on the mathematically solved this, by the way, it's scientifically. So the last one they look at is the value of cooperation. So the value of cooperation, you would think like this. Basically, each country would be more or less like a state, not in a political sense, but in coordination. So what they found out is by doing this full cooperation, they found that all these 3 countries are better off compared to their unilateral move. Just like an example, I'm from Florida. If I'm buying something from Georgia, I expect to pay something that they are paying plus some tax and some transportation. So think about in that framework. If you have this full cooperation without any restriction, the science, the model is telling you everybody else is better off compared to the unilateral move. Again, I found this very fascinating. This study is under peer review. Next step, we want to extend this into including flood protection as well. Since we are in a COVID-19 situation, probably most people know what means flattening the curve, which means that you have a certain level of system capacity, and you don't want that to be basically overpowered. To give you an example, since I'm here in Florida, and then actually happens to be one of the bad places here right now, we got a lot of problem, but think about as a US, we have less than 1 million total bed, and our country is more than 330 million people. So if everybody is got sick tomorrow, we are in trouble. So basically, if you think about optimization of hydropower and flood protection, what it does is it flattens the curve. It will hold more water upstreams, and it will let an amount that allows others to manage themselves. So basically, in other words, we are trying to flatten the curve as well. Now, if I look at all this together, including the scientific, what the science is telling us, it just points to dams, even more dams. I know this may not be a surprise for some people, but maybe a surprise for a lot of people. People are talking about the GERD. Great, that has significant importance, and then it helps significantly for Sudan and downstreams, but I would argue it's not even enough. So you would probably need, and I'm quoting and I'm looking at from the scientific perspective, you would probably need even more dams upstreams. This will allow you from, for example, drought mitigation, just the GERD, by extension. Remember, I'm talking about the full cooperation and the full resource allocation, okay? In that case, you are literally changing or increasing 50% of the storage for Egypt. And for Sudan, it's more than 500%. So if you think about in flood control and building this, it even help you more because future climate is even more variable. I happen to work closely with, and look at the data for Nile Basin. I've looked at, how does future climate looks like. Everybody agrees about the temperature that's rising more and more. But rainfall is a different how it changed. So you have more variability. So the expectation in the future is going to be either flood or famine. And how do you, mitigate that? You need more storage, basically. That's another thing. I would also argue that this additional storage that you will put in aligns with both, in this case for Egypt and Sudan. Again, I'm referencing studies that, done within the 3 countries, but this could be extended into the 11 countries as well. It aligns very well with Egypt and Sudan or downstream countries. Why? I would explain. So the first thing is GERD is at the outlets. I mean, the location is fixed. That's not going to change. So what optimal power generation means from the scientific perspective is that you have to have a regulated flow going down as well as produce more energy, okay? Even if you build more dams, I argue that you need more storage. After you meet the basic minimum production, even for agriculture, that power production is going to compete with irrigation. So once you meet that, it's a matter of trade-off. So the free economy is going to push you how to operate. So in this case, that you, by definition, even if you store more water upstreams, that's basically guaranteeing what's going downstream. So if you purely look at it from the scientific perspective, that simply means that you're optimizing for the whole region. Then import export will come in. So those are in general what you are going to see. That's why I think our issue is actually we need to get more dam and more storage. Just to summarize the big picture, I think what I see from my experience on this side of the world as well is you do need a diversified portfolio. Everybody who knows a little bit about economy and so on, they have this expression, don't put your egg in one basket. Basically, you have to diversify. How do we do it in terms of the Nile Basin? This would be looking at, your underground, your surface water, you manage your drought at times, and then you manage also your flood. Integrated hydrologic modeling, resource optimization, some of these will be covered later on, and an adaptive management are the way forward as I see it. So for everyone really to look at that, how this benefit, I think individual trying to optimize things for individual country, I mean, it just shows some of the research. So that's not going to work basically. So this full cooperation, and we are looking at from scientific perspective. I'm not talking about any politics and nothing like that. That's a different story. Just looking at the science, that what this full cooperation means is that it created a way that basically allows each of the countries to act like a state, not in a political sense state, but in terms of integration. With that, I'm gonna stop. That's all I have. And if you have question for me, please hold on until the end. We're gonna address that. And then we are gonna transition to the next presentation by Dr. Hamad. While he's making up his presentation, I'm gonna introduce him as well. I'm really happy to be joined today by, as one of the panelists, Dr. Hamad. He's the former minister for the Ministry of Water Resources, Irrigation and Electricity in Sudan, and has extensive experience in integrated water resources management, water policy, project planning and management. He represented Sudan as one of the panels of experts in Nile Basin Initiative and a member of the Eastern Nile team as well. Currently, he's an associate professor working with 5 universities in Sudan. We are really happy to have him. He has published numerous technical articles. We are really happy to have him presenting for us. I will pass it to you, Dr. Hamad.
He may be having some technical difficulties. While I'm helping him offline, would you mind moving into the next speaker?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we'll do that.
Okay.
So the next presenter is Professor Yahdeov. He is a chair from Public International Law at Aberdeen Law School. He is a co-director of the Aberdeen Center for Constitutional and Public International Law. Zara has written several articles on various aspects of international laws and governance. He currently participates with a huge project, actually. It's a $5.5 million EU-led project that looks at not just only one place, looking at the Zambezi or Omo River. He is also co-founding for the a yearly book, basically a reviewed that comes every year, and he has a lot of experience on. We thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to pass it to you, Dr. Yedeko.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to commend We Aspire for aspiring to aspire us all. I believe we need more of this in the Nile Basin and in Africa in general, to promote cooperation in the governance of natural resources in the continent. My intervention in this topic is very much to do with the things that we need to do to promote cooperation and equity in the Nile Basin. And I see a feature, a positive feature from the good negotiations that affirms the need for promoting equitable, reasonable, and cooperative attitude toward this Nile water governance. As someone who closely followed the GERD negotiations, I see a strong case for the promotion of equity and cooperation in the Nile Basin. If you imagine that a strong and an effective cooperative arrangement is in the Nile Basin, and that effective system or framework was used to handle and resolve the issues around the GERD, the result would have been different. Would not have been where we are today, quarreling each other, taking the case to Washington or to New York or what have you. So for this reason, I would offer or maybe reaffirm the following three points in order to promote cooperation and equity in the Nile Basin. The first one is that we need an equitable and cooperative basin-wide framework in the Nile Basin. Unfortunately, the Nile does not have an effective binding legal framework as we speak. Unlike many other African basin organizations. This doesn't mean that there are no some positive endeavors. We have the Nile Basin Initiative, we have the Cooperative Framework Agreement, we have the Declaration of Principles that are all based upon modern principles of international water law, including the principle of equitable and reasonable use, the duty to undertake due diligence when you make a use of water resource. If you look at very closely the submissions of Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt to the UN Security Council, you also see reference to modern principles of international water law by all of them at a varied degree, So these are very positive. And we have to build upon this positive initiatives and endeavors to have an effective cooperation in the Nile Basin. In order to do that, I think two things are important. The first thing is that we have to have consensus around the normative foundations of governance or international water law. So we have to have consensus on equitable and reasonable use. We have to have consensus on the principle of cooperation and the duty to prevent significant harm when we make use of Nile waters. So what this means is that we have to abandon the old thinking of governance. For everyone, the modern thinking is the way forward as others are doing it. So that's one thing that we have to work very seriously upon. I know there is a concern from downstream and upstream countries around these normative questions, but I don't think these are reconcilable. They can be reconciled, and there can be compromises to be made. So this is one aspect of the governance question with respect to building effective Nile Basin legal framework or governance framework. The second one is that this needs to be supported by institutional mechanism. We need a Nile Basin Commission that would be able to effectively manage projects, questions, concerns, and build upon the hopes of all riparian countries. And I believe Nile Basin countries can learn from others. There are plenty of cooperative frameworks in Latin America, in the Americas, in Asia, in Europe. But we don't even need to go as far as the Americas or Europe or whatever. Even within Africa, we have very successful cooperative frameworks. And I would like to mention two examples. So in 2017, I traveled to the Zambezi Basin as part of my global consortium or research project. And two things struck or grabbed my attention. The first one was the close collaboration between Zimbabwe and Zambia. These two countries, as part of the Zambezi River Basin, operate, manage, and share the benefits of the Kariba Dam Complex, or the Kariba Dam Complex, or the Kariba Dam provides electricity to both Zambia and Zimbabwe. And it is jointly managed, operated, and the benefits shared by the two countries. And the basis for this collaboration or coordination is the principle of equality. It's not even the principle of equity. So this is exemplary. Two countries, ripened countries, working together to make the best out of the Zambezi water resources. The second example in Zambezi is the Zambezi River Commission established in 2014. So the Zambezi River is managed by a commission, and all riparian countries participate in this commission. There is a council of ministers. There are technical bodies that coordinate the hopes and fears and projects of all concerned in the Zambezi River Basin. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that the Nile Basin countries must sort out the issues around the cooperative framework agreement so that we'll have a Nile River Basin Commission that coordinates all efforts of countries, that promotes cooperation within the Nile Basin in accordance with established principles of international water law. So that's my first point. The second important point I would like to make is that in the Nile Basin, we need a homegrown approach to water governance. What I mean by homegrown is not limited to national approach. It's not limited to sovereignty. When I say homegrown, I mean Nile Basin-based approach to governance, African approach to water governance. We all know the history of the Nile Basin. We all know the role played by external powers, including colonial powers, or others who have interest in the Nile Basin, from politics, economics, or other dimensions. We must learn lessons from the fact that these external powers have complicated things in the Nile Basin. And we must learn lessons from the GER negotiations itself. The case was taken to Washington for some reason, in my view, for some wrong reason. The case was also taken to New York before the UN Security Council, in my view, without any legal foundation or legal basis, because water sharing is not a question of international peace and security. It's a question of governing a natural resource, shared resource, based on established principles of international law. And have you got any resolution of the disagreements and the concerns based on what happened in New York or in Washington? No. So we have to go back to the homegrown approach to resolve tensions in the Nile Basin. And the best approach is the three countries or the Nile Basin countries sit and talk and resolve their issues and maximize on their commonalities in order to have an effective and beneficial governance approach to the Nile waters. So this is the second important point I would like to make. So going to third parties outside the Nile Basin is not a best approach to water governance in Africa or in the Nile Basin more specifically. The third point I would like to make, which will be very brief, is that we have to adopt an integrated approach to water governance in the Nile. What I mean by that is that water must be seen as a driver for elevating water, energy, and food poverty in the region. So we have to use and conserve the Nile waters in the light of making the best out of it to get energy that we need, to get food that we need, and to also promote access to clean water and sanitation. So this needs to be integrated on the basis of science, on the basis of appropriate policy. The countries must not try to do everything. They have to look into their best comparative advantage in terms of specialization. So some of them may be better off in terms of producing hydropower. Others may be better off to focus in agriculture or industrialization. Thereby, they can promote. They can share their benefits. One important to mention here is that some countries, even within the Eastern Nile Basin, are attempting to promote this kind of integrated approach by getting electricity from one of them and then giving back other things in kind. So we have to be able to promote this notion so that we make an equitable use of Nile waters, but also we conserve the resource itself. So this is one aspect of the integration issue. The second and last point I'd like to make is that we have to think beyond water. We have to frame water in a wider context. Water must be a driver for investment, a driver for industrialization, a driver for integrating or connecting the region through infrastructure.
Professor Zerai, a couple of minutes.
That is absolutely fine. Yes, I'm almost done. So in short, what the Nile Basin needs is not quarreling on the basis of unilateral projects. What the Nile Basin requires is a basin-wide approach to governance based on mutual interests, based on established principles of international water law, based on science and policy that is informed by studies, expert opinions, and peaceful coexistence among Nile riparian countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zerai. I actually forgot to say that he's one of our experts at We Aspire volunteers. So thank you for your time. And I'm happy to say that Dr. Hamad had a little bit of issue getting into this system, but now he's here and I already introduced him to you all, but I'm gonna directly pass for him to start his presentation. Welcome, Dr. Hamad.
We're getting questions, so I'm going to save them and then I'll ask at the end. Did you hear me, Toria?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. My talk, which was supposed to be at the beginning just to put the picture, the whole picture in perspective, is about the Nile cooperative journey. How did it go? Some information that you already know, that the Nile is the longest and nourishes a livelihood and ecosystem and serves more than 350 million people. This picture you have seen, the 11 countries that are. It's a very long chronicle cooperation with the Nile. Egypt and Sudan, they had their bilateral cooperation more than 100 years now. Hydromet came into Nile in 1992, and then three parallel tracks took place: an informal one and a legal institutional one, and the Nile Basin Initiative. The informal one, 2000 rotating conferences funded by CEDA Canada. The legal and institutional cooperative framework extended from 1997 up to 2010 under the support of UNDP. And the Nile initiative started in 1999 and it is going on so far. Well, I'm going to focus on the Nile Basin Initiative. The Nile Basin countries are by population growth, environmental degradation, to mention a few. Interlinked poverty triggering the rest. It is based on poverty. Actually, this is the prevailing issue in the basin. The diversity is in many ways topographical, climate, environment, history, culture, and beliefs. But this diversity should help us to work together because we can make the maximum use of these diversities. This is the structure of the Nile Basin Initiative that is headed by the Nile Council of Ministers, and there is a technical advisory committee, the TAC, Nile TAC, and then there is the secretariat in Entebbe. Organization. This is the shared vision program. This is very important because we have spent a lot of time arriving to these words, which you can take them one by one to achieve sustainable socio-economic development through equitable utilization of and benefit from the common Nile Basin water resources. One of the, and here you have this very vision and going down to action on the ground. The shared vision program is narrowing down while the subsidiary action program is spreading because of action on the ground. The Nile Basin Initiative, this is the shared vision program, which is mainly soft grants, mainly for capacity and trust building. IWRN approach for all related fields, as we are going to see. Decentralization of the ownership and awareness, paving the way for action on the ground to be taken care of by the subsidiary action program. There are two centers, Entro Center and NELSAP CU Center, and it is mainly focusing on action on the ground through sustainable joint development. This is showing the shared vision program. This has finished actually in 2006, something like that. And you can see here benefit sharing, environment, power trade, applied training, communication, agriculture, and water resources. So it is trying to follow the IWRN concept. The subsidiary action program aimed at poverty reduction. This is action on the ground development, economic development, and reversal of the environmental degradation, and seeking win-win opportunities among two. And I think my colleague just talked about this in a very nice way. What are the experiences and lessons learned this process? We have developed a shared vision, which I have shown just before, important process that facilitates convergence of views towards cooperation. And I think this is one of the fruits that were gained from this experience, that we started to see through the eyes of each other. Instead of looking nationally, we started looking regionally. And instead of talking about sharing of water, we started talking about sharing of benefits. We have agreed on our policy guidelines, and you have seen the picture there, the two triangles. Common policy help aim, facilitate, and then moving from conflict to cooperation and unlocking the development potential, the establishment of new environmental situation, and seeking win-win benefits. These are some of the lessons learned. More, and this is very important, trust and ownership. A long-term process and needs invested significant time and resources, but builds real ownership to the process. The decentralization was a key institution or instrument in this, that the shared vision program projects were distributed among the different countries, and daily it brought in trust and ownership. Partnership among and within riparian countries, international agencies, and donors, essentially for a coordinated process. Strong with community societies engaged and built and the process. Actually, what are the challenges and opportunities? Challenges stem from the location, population growth, and these are the challenges: dependence on the Nile and prejudices. These are the challenges that we have to face. What are the opportunities? Opportunities linked to and bounded by the Nile, whether from the Nile or even beyond the Nile. There are so many things to be unlocked. The political will was a very important milestone and demonstration to the world together, and that the countries are sitting together. At the beginning, when we started this process, the ministers used to sit with the tech assistants around them, but the ministers were sitting together at the high table and working as a one front. The shared vision through the support of the international community, and this is was very important that we, in the ICON in 2001, we had a very strong support from the international community, especially for the shared vision program. Some of the success stories, leveling the playing field through the shared vision program. What did we do? Some of the things: reviewing and harmonizing water policies, and this I was responsible for that one. Planning and managing of joint projects. Again, I was one of the specialists working on this one. Involvement of multi-stakeholders, this even parliamentarians and the media and others. Transboundary environment, power, and trade has been tested in the different projects. Pick the action program, and there are so many. I think my friend Fak Ahmed is going to talk about some of this. The Nile is very attractive international development partners. So this was the opportunity. Seeing is believing. We went to different places to see that we are not alone in this world, and we have done what we are doing has been done to a certain extent in other places, and this was very useful. The Rusumo Falls Dam, maybe somebody from the Nile Equatorial Lakes may talk about this, and the Manantali and Diama case in the OMVS. These are examples of that. This is an existing one, and this is going on now for the time being. Parallel to GERD in the Eastern Nile, this is in the Nile Equatorial Lakes. Some setbacks, not everything went well. One of the setbacks is the freezing of Egypt in the Nile Basin Initiative activities. Sadly, this is still the case. Sudan was there, but Sudan changed its position and joined the MBI, and effort to make Egypt join. Some of the lost opportunities, and some of them are stepping from the freezing of Egypt. The joint multipurpose project, and maybe Fak Ahmed, if you find the time, we talk a little bit about it. This was a golden opportunity. We lost it, and it could have helped with the GERD discussions now.
Two minutes, Dr. Hamad. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This I talked about the national thinking instead of the regional thinking, but now we are moving from that one. Poverty, large investment, joint projects in poor countries. Okay, now this is the dream. I'm going to spend the 2 minutes on this one. This is the dream that I would like people to share with me, that we try to find a Nile economic bloc. For all this, we hope that to grasp buffet, not cocktail meals, that is sharing the difference between sharing water and sharing benefit. Cooperative and competitive advantage, and I think my friend talked about it. Cropping, zoning, bundling of multi-programs and projects. Resumo versus GERD could be an anchor project. And the Nile economic bloc, starting with the Eastern Nile economic bloc. This picture shows how, my friend talked about it, how the high potential of hydropower generation in Ethiopia, and this talks about the high potential of landscape, very fertile land. This is just needing water, that's all. And I think let us realize this dream as a vision, Eastern Nile economic bloc by 2035, I hope so. And the Nile equatorial, Nile hope on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamad. Really appreciate it. And I hope people are listening, not just regular people like us, but people who are decision makers. Some of your vision, I think this is a great presentation. I appreciate that. We are going to pass to the next presentation. That will be Mr. Fakka Hamad Nagash Nuru. Mr. Nagash is an executive director of the Eastern Nile Technical Region office covering Egypt, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Sudan within the Nile Basin Initiative. His responsibility includes the identification, preparation, and planning of investment projects in water sector that have transboundary implications in irrigation, hydropower, and power trade, among others. He is a former director of transboundary river affairs in the Ministry of Water, Irrigation, and Energy in Ethiopia, where he oversaw some of the program compliance as well as transboundary issues. I must say that Mr. Fakka Hamad actually was traveling and he just came 5 minutes before we started our presentation. And I really appreciate Mr. Fakka Hamad that you took the time, and really appreciate you joining us today. And I will pass it to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Also for meeting many of the friends, including Dr. Usman, to whom I talked to this afternoon in Khartoum by telephone, but we didn't see each other now. This is a good opportunity. So I'm talking about the Eastern Nile Technical Regional Office in Turo, which is actually working to ensure sustainable cooperation in the Eastern Nile. Intro was established actually as part of, as one of the 3 centers of the Nile Basin Initiative in 2002, mainly to prepare cooperative investment projects that show tangible benefits of cooperation on the ground, so that the countries cannot consider cooperation as a mere talk, but they have to know that there is huge benefit in that. Members actually mentioned it was established by Ethiopia, Egypt, and the Sudan. South Sudan was not an independent country, but joined in 2014. It is managed by the 3 countries, mainly on rotation, 3 technical senior management staff, but other staffs are recruited competitively, and it is headquartered in Addis Ababa. Up front, I will start with the challenges Intro is facing. It has a legal challenge because it is a transitional institutional mechanism, that is established with a goodwill, with gentleman agreements of the 3 ministers. Also, there are institutional, challenges whereby now there is an imposed shift in the mandate of Intro from investment to management as a result of dwindling support from development partners following the freeze of Egypt. There is also financial challenges related to low country contribution. Some countries are not contributing. Some countries are not contributing. Others may contribute lately, but particularly development partners who promised actually to provide the necessary financing for project preparation is going down. Freezing by member states, as indicate as informed by my friend, Dr. Usman El Tom. In 2010, Egypt and Sudan froze cooperation. Sudan came back in 2013, but Egypt is still out of the Eastern Nile cooperation, even the Nile Basin cooperation. There are also some members making effort to undermine those NBI institutions, mainly by Egypt, prioritizing national issue over regional agenda. This is also another challenge we are facing. Also, countries having a parallel arrangement that could have been better handled by this regional, the regional entity, like the issue of tripartite arrangement around the GERD, while actually Intro is well positioned to handle it. But I'm not talking about only the challenges, but there are opportunities that countries established already, a unique and a complex behavior, whereby they can keep on cooperating even if there is no radical difference among them. This is actually a very big opportunity. They keep on talking, dialoguing, and the discussion. Emerging international agenda requiring countries to cooperate, like climate change, conflict around shared water resources. Those are emerging international agendas. Increased emphasis on issues in the Eastern Nile by the international community. Now, with the GERD, the difference among the countries on the GERD, the Eastern Nile is getting a very big emphasis. Economic development in the countries, particularly some countries are showing impressive economic development, and there's a necessity of investment in the water sector. Existence of opportunities for cooperative development and the management of water resources in the Eastern Nile. There is huge opportunity for future development. Again, big potential for complementarity of development among the three countries, like hydropower, very big opportunity in Ethiopia, irrigation, huge opportunity in Sudan, the service sector, very big opportunity in Egypt. Dr. Osman mentioned about the joint multipurpose project. This is actually a lost opportunity in the Eastern Nile. This is a project identified in 2005 by Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. It is an anchor project, hydropower, irrigation, flood, watershed management. It is a multi-purpose project. So countries agreed actually on the JMEP that it has to be a multi-purpose. The main criteria is that it has to benefit three countries, no significant impact on any of the countries, and there should not be any regret project. Three basins in Ethiopia compared, Baro, Akobo, Tekeze, and the Blue Nile. Blue Nile is selected for it offers huge opportunity for such anchor project. A consultant was hired to undertake strategic social and environmental assessment from Canada, Essensin Lavalin. Immediately while the consultant was undertaking the study, upstream countries, 6 upstream countries signed the cooperative framework agreement. But the parallel arrangement of the Nile cooperation was breached because originally cooperation in the Nile was a parallel arrangement, technical cooperation and the legal. If the legal run, the original design was that the countries will continue with the technical cooperation, but unfortunately, Egypt and Sudan froze cooperation, and as they walked out of the project as well as the negotiation, Ethiopia frustrated by these two consecutive events, that is, Egypt's and Sudan's refusal to sign the CFA, as well as walking out of JMEP. Then Ethiopia took one of the three projects that was a candidate for JMEP as a national project, which is a GERD. Currently, Ethiopia and Sudan are cooperating actively, but they are facing their own challenges currently, particularly related to finance, as well as instability. Also, the COVID issue is there. South Sudan is also participating, but is not paying country contributing. Egypt is still freezing. Cooperation in Eastern Nile is not an option. This is actually repeatedly stated by all the three countries, but the practice is not actually showing that. Generally, countries normally cooperate when they perceive that the net benefit of cooperation is better than the net cost. At the same time, the net, countries also cooperate when the net cost of non-cooperation is higher than the cost of cooperation. So it is important to show countries that there is higher benefit of cooperation at a business scale than unilateral action. And this has to be shown in a very tangible way if really we want to sustain the cooperation. It is also important to clearly work out and demonstrate in a tangible way the dynamics and the flow of benefits of cooperation in the basin. Who is really benefiting out of cooperation? In what way, in what magnitude, upstream, downstream? This has to really be demonstrated if policymakers have to perceive that there is benefit in that. It's also important to launch aggressive hydro diplomacy with the objective of influencing policymakers involving, several parties of the society that can benefit from cooperation or that will pay, the cost if there is no cooperation among the countries. Aggressive engagement of development partners as a neutral catalyst to cooperation, focusing on demonstration of tangible benefits is also another important if we really need to raise the level of cooperation in the countries. Then, the already defined JMP has to be reinitiated, taking other projects as a Nikolai, but with intensive investment in trust building, because the working out of the countries out of the JMP and the current misunderstanding around the GERD really eroded the already fueled trust among the countries. What efforts have been made so far in the Eastern Nile? So really, a lot of efforts have been made to improve the situation. Actually, to improve the situation of cooperation in the Eastern Nile, consistent and factual based, and then all countries have to be encouraged to come back to cooperation, to reinstate the focus of INTRO toward preparation of transboundary cooperative investment is actually very important. Development partners consistent support on the investment part, cooperative investment. Countries to prioritize and invest in cooperatively prepared projects. Actually work towards the changing NBI to permanent institutional mechanism. Broaden the baskets of benefits of cooperation. And again, broadening the engagement of stakeholders is also very important. Then what efforts have been made so far in the Eastern Nile? Actually, INTRO was established to prepare, as I mentioned earlier, to prepare and implement transboundary investment projects that show tangible benefit. First round of IDEN projects have been successfully implemented. This particularly involves power interconnection, like the Ethiopia-Sudan power interconnection, which the countries are now trading for the last 5-6 years. Irrigation development in the 3 countries in Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan already implemented. There is also a watershed management in Ethiopia around Lake Tana, a very successful project to really show the benefit of rehabilitating the degraded environment. This is also implemented in Sudan and Egypt. There is a power trade study among the 3 countries which shows the feasibility of trading 3,200 megawatt of energy from Ethiopia to Egypt and Sudan, with one project actually studied to pre-feasibility level, that is the former border dam, currently which is a GERD, which was studied by the 3 countries. The role of development partners and then the member countries really, and this has also been improved in this respect. Loss of interest of development partners in investment projects, particularly since the freezing of Egypt. And the role of Egypt in shooting down investment project is also played a very big role in this shift of INTRO to move into another project, soft projects. Then currently we are working on flood forecasting and early warning. We are doing this during rainy season. We also worked on multi-sector investment opportunity analysis, which shows the impact of planned investment on one another and the benefits that they will accrue. We are working successfully in dam safety. Also, we are working in coordinated operation of cascade dams. We have a lot of cascade dams. Internship program where we bring young scientists from the 4 countries, allow them to jointly identify common problems and they jointly solve it. So we are at the same time creating solidarity in the future, inheritors of the basin. We are working on irrigation efficiency, which is actually one of a very good initiative that can save huge amount of water in the Eastern Nile for reallocation, for other uses. We are also working on conjunctive use of groundwater and the surface water to minimize the pressure on surface water. We are working on knowledge-based hydro diplomacy to bring in, the other parts of the society also into the forum. And we are working on development communication so that everybody can understand what is going on in the basin. When we look at the vision, this is my last slide. So the vision for the Eastern Nile Technical Regional Office is to have a competent, reliable, and flexible regional entity that responds to the regional interests and toward which the member states turn in times of necessity. So this is a type of institution that we want to build currently as a transitional arrangement. So to realize this, Interim must develop its competence to respond to the need of the countries. Also, Interim must secure the trust of member states and the development partners so that it can keep on preparing cooperative investment projects that the countries can really realize and understand in a tangible way the benefits of cooperation. Also, Interim must serve as an appropriate platform for member states to dialogue, negotiate, and work together. We also expect member states to prioritize the regional agenda over and above the national issues. Currently, this is not coming very fast. And also we expect development partners to continue support of regional development initiative. We want active participation of a wider stakeholder in the basin. And the most important is it is important, by the basin, the owners of the basin, to put in place an all agreed upon legal and institutional mechanism that can really manage the basin in a sustainable way. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Fakamed. Really appreciate, given the time, the tight time you had today, you were able to join us. Appreciate that. We'll go into the next presenter, which is Dr. Mogus. He's a consultant and an adjunct professor with the University of Connecticut. Prior to having that, he held positions as the Dean of School of Graduate in Arba Minch University, where I am from actually. And then later on as a professor with Addis Ababa University. Dr. Mogus is an expert in water and climate of the Nile Basin. He facilitated the Sustainable Development Goal mainstreaming project for Africa, among others. He has written many articles related with Nile Basin climate and hydrology. I'm glad to have him today. It's your, Dr. Mogus, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Tonsau. I join my colleagues in appreciating We Aspire that you are really trying your effort to shape global opinions on the Nile Basin. Can you share, I'm sharing my, I have a few slides. I'm also happy to see most of the colleagues I know and some of colleagues I haven't seen facially, like Professor Zarai. I'm happy to see all of them. Can you see? Is it shared?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think most of the talks have been in one or the other way have been discussed. It made my life a little bit easier. So I would like, for the purpose of the audience, maybe there are people who doesn't know very well Nile, I would like to explain a little bit the Nile. And also I would go into big challenges. What are the challenges in terms of hydrology that dictate conflict and mistrust in the basin? And the other is the socio-economic and climate drivers that also have put additional pressure on the conflict in the basin. And next, I would see my solutions, big solutions into what we can do, like science solutions, cooperative framework already discussed. Maybe I will not dwell most on this. And the other is confidence building and investment, which is very crucial in that region. So as you know, this is most of you who know, I think it will not be very much interesting, but for those who doesn't know Nile Basin, this is the equatorial Nile Basin with Nile contributed from Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and all these countries. And these countries, even though the capacity to generate flow is high, because of complex hydrology around here, they only contribute to around 15% to the main Nile. And this is Ethiopian Nile, which consists of Atbara or Takaze in Ethiopian name, and Abai or Blue Nile, and Baro Akobo in Ethiopia, but Sobat when it's out of Ethiopia. Or this contributes almost 85–86% of the flow from the highland mountain regions of Ethiopia. But there are misconceptions sometimes that in Ethiopia, Abai contributes 85–86%, but Abai contributes close to 58–56% of the total flow. So in terms of spatial variability of the hydro, most of the flows are contributed from, as you can see, from the highland part of the Eastern Sudan and mostly from Ethiopia. And there is a lot of rainfall generated in the equatorial and in the South Sudan. However, this region is, as I will show you a little bit later, this is a big water sink area, and all of this big water producing area sinks into a huge swamp in this area. So as you can see, these blue areas are water source areas. As we go further into Sudan and Egypt, the water production reduces and it turns into water utilization immediately. As you can see from the left of the figures, high evaporation in Egypt and Sudan, and also, of course, in Ethiopia, a little bit of seasonal rainfall in 3 to 4 months, and the rest, of course, 8 months, we can see there is evaporation. I'll come into that area. So what is the complexity? The complexity that contributes to the conflict is that these upper regions of Nile, which I call water source area in Ethiopia and equatorial areas, generates huge amount of water. These areas, as you can see, are highland areas. This is elevation from Mediterranean, as you can see. So they are highland areas. Immediately, this broad rainfall area, water source area, when the flow is concentrated into channels, there is, I call this B region, energy source region in the Blue Nile. And of course, towards Lake Victoria, there's also potential for energy in this area. And this C region is where what I call water sink areas. This area is where a lot of contribution from the equatorial area and also from South Sudan sinks in this huge swamp. It's a very vital ecosystem for maintaining the moisture equilibrium in the region. It's not that it's not useful, but it's useful. But at the same time, it's an area where a lot of water sinks in this region. And then as we go further, we can see from Khartoum onwards, or a little bit before Khartoum, all the areas are desert areas or arid areas whereby 90% of the Nile irrigation takes place, or this is abstraction area, as you can see. So it's complex such that most of the flows from the highlands runs in within 3 to 4 months. There is no time to stay for infiltration. There is no time to concentrate for revitalizing the soil moisture. So immediately when these 3 or 4 months goes, it immediately goes, Ethiopian highlands become dry for 7 to 8 months. That's where when rainfall variability strikes this part of Nile Basin, you can see over the last 100 years, 10 to 12 times critical drought occurred in this part of the Nile. And at the same time, as you can see, the flows contributed from the White Nile is very steady. As you can see, the variation is very little. So the flow contributing to the downstream countries is very predictable because of the damping effect of this middle part of the lakes and the swamps. Whereas the huge flow contributed from Ethiopian highlands, Blue Nile and others, you can see it's generated in 3 to 4 months. And because of this short period of flow is concentrated in that area, and there is big seasonal variability at the same time, variability within the season. And the other important considerations that we need to understand is the area where most of the water generated in the Blue Nile and Ethiopian highlands is highly sensitive to small change. What does it mean? It means that for a unit change of precipitation, whether it's increasing or decreasing, the flow is magnified. The sensitivity of flow is magnified. Let's say if there is 1 unit of precipitation, the flow probably would be 2 times. If there is a reduction of 1 unit of precipitation, it reduces with that magnitude. So it's highly sensitive. Whereas the flow contributed from the equatorial is, as I told you, is not sensitive. So these are some of the manifestations that we did in a research study, especially Atbara or Tekkaze is highly sensitive, and some of the highland in Kagera also is highly sensitive. So it's an indication when climate change strikes for, as we can see, a little bit reduction of precipitation or increase of precipitation magnifies the flow generation in that part of soil. It's really concerning, this sensitivity. I just want quickly to show you some of the flow conditions. You can see this is equatorial where the flows are very steady, predictable, doesn't change. We did some climate change analysis, sensitivity analysis. The change is very insensitive even to climate change. And we can go to Blue Nile where flow is contributed in 3 to 4 months. This is where high sensitivities exhibited. So that's where the concern of downstream countries also comes into picture. It's highly sensitive during the drought and during wet season. And also the main Nile is also dictated or driven by the variability of Blue Nile because most of the flow is generated from that. So this seasonality is where some of my colleagues talked about the picture of dam comes. We have to arrest this variability, this seasonal variability, and distribute it into more months so that we can fairly use the flow. The second part of it is that population, economic growth, and climate change are two drivers that also drive conflict and mistrust in the region. You can see population in 1970 was close to 100 million. Now population is close to 500. Population of Eastern Nile countries, not Eastern Basin. Eastern Nile countries is close to 550 million, and it goes up to 1 billion. Nile countries. Therefore, what does it mean? Water scarcity index, or the per capita water availability, drastically goes without even including the economic consideration, economic growth. So what does this make? It makes that delayed cooperation adds additional complexity to negotiations. It was very easy to cooperate in 1970s, in 1950s than 2020. It would be very complex to cooperate as time goes on. So delayed cooperation would be very difficult. It adds additional complexity to the understanding of cooperative frameworks. Of course, other issues also crop up. So I think it's very important to realize this part of these drivers. The second drivers that also is a challenge for the basin is the climate change. Climate change, many studies show that there is a tendency of total volume of flow would increase in the Nile basin, but what's concerning is that the recurrence of floods and droughts would increase. As you can see, some of the presentations, most of the models, climate change models most of them show a tendency of flow increase, but some of them, of course, also show decreasing tendency. But what drives concern in the region is that floods, as we saw recently, Khartoum area is flooded, most of Ethiopia is flooded, and most of Eastern region is flooded. So the frequency of flood would increase. Of course, the frequency of droughts also increase. The only solution for this type of abatement is that we need to have a bankable water. We have to store water. We have to reasonably share that stored water within a region that is available for a good storage site. So that we can avoid unpredictable situations in the basin. What do we have as available water resource additional? We have to also go very transparently to understand what is there in the system. We know that there is a huge rainfall in the system. This is a FAO study that shows in both the Sudans, 51% of the rainfall of the Nile Basin occurs in both Sudans. It was, I generated from FAO report, which was before separation of Sudan. And Ethiopia have almost 23% of rainfall, Uganda. So these three countries have almost 83% of the rainfall that contributes to the flow. That should be arrested in terms of enhancing wide area productivity, in terms of addressing this rainfall by different rainfall technologies, providing, not necessarily that every country wants to go into irrigation because they want to irrigate. The ultimate irrigation water use is to produce food for a decent living. So whichever.
2 minutes, Dr. Mogas, 2 minutes.
Okay, and the second is I would like to stress is in the system there are different studies since Hearst period that there are a lot of water gain areas that I call them 21st century storage schemes that includes in the Blue Nile. That is, some of them are for hydropower, some of them are for irrigation, some of the storage would be like for storing a multi-year floods. Not, for example, in Sud area, you cannot build a dam that controls annual floods, but a multi-year flood, let's say once in 10 years, you can store that kind of floods and channel it properly. So I'll go, and the second water available is some of the renewable water aquifers in the region. I did many studies. The study shows there are huge aquifers that can be tapped as a way of future utilization for some of the countries when drought strikes, when there is population driver increases. So we have to also utilize that huge non-renewable water resource in case of situations that has problems, water shortage. I also studied some of the desalination costs are reducing in the region. Even sometimes the cost of desalination per meter cube in some countries are reducing less than the freshwater availability. So there are countries where the coastline is more than 2,000 miles. That kind of, I think, can be one abutment area that countries can utilize this water resource. So there is a lot of sources that we can leverage in terms of cooperation. And the other water source area is improving large-scale irrigation water management in the region. Large-scale irrigation in downstream countries are suffering from water loss. So water saving are most important issues that the region have to deal through modernizing irrigation, through smart irrigations. And some of the studies I studied showed that as much as 40 billion meter cube of water can be saved through modernizing irrigation in the region. So there is untapped irrigation, but that hasn't been properly studied, that hasn't been accounted for, that we can dwell on. So what are the solutions? I say the solution is, one is we have to go into the science. Science anywhere, whether you do it in Sudan or Ethiopia or Egypt or America, would remain as long as we have solid data, as long as we have the same assumptions. So we go into the science and go into integrated river basin or integrated water resource management approach and integrate all the sources and sinks that I showed you. So in this platform, we can integrate and develop a river basin model and find out where we can gain water, where we can gain energy, where we can gain all this. And also include in the future some of the abutment solutions, like how we can improve rain-fed agriculture in the region, how we can use some of the water available in the basin. So this is one of, but as Dr. Osman and others alluded, we have to think this river is one river, and we need to have a strategy with one institutional mechanism that I would show you here. So we have, as I showed you, we have challenges that the history of Nile is by itself a challenge that created resistance. We have rapid population and climate change, and we have a basis to start. Nile Basin Initiative, a basis. We have a lot of interaction. We have developed a human resource base that interact to each other over the last 20 years. I think then we have also scientific knowledge created in intro, in Nile Basin. Professor Osman and Fak Ahmed was part of it. We have enormous knowledge that we can start. And what's lacking is, how do we bring this information? We need to have a basis for scientific interaction between regional countries. We need to have public diplomacy that should be independent of the governments. Otherwise, if it's dictated by the government, as we see in the region, scientists are mostly dictated by the government's policy. But as scientists, I think we can interact to each other and come up with sounding solutions. Sounding solutions is very essential from the scientists. So agreement is very important, and most of all, we need to enhance investment. We need to have a quick investment that builds trust in between these countries. So if we can, as Ato Ahmed said, Ahmed said, if we can restart those projects, multi-purpose projects as incentive, then it will help this kind of confidence building and project enhancement in that region. So this is what I would like to talk. I think if you have a question, I'll stop here. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Moges. I couldn't agree more. I could listen this all day long, not just yours, the others, but because of the timing, we have to move on. You mentioned two things that took my attention a lot. One thing you said is sensitivity. And I believe some of this sensitivity for rainfall and stream flow could also be addressed through some of the effort to store water. The whole idea of sensitivity is if the watershed is not storing enough water, then whatever you get or you don't get is magnified. And some of this effort could be, afforestation, reforestation, those kind of things would also help. You also mentioned about the delayed cooperation. I think I couldn't agree even more because people, they go their own way and then they bring some solutions that may not necessarily will be as a Nile Basin. So I appreciate that. And we will go to the next presentation. The last but not the least, in fact, I'm excited to hear about this, Dr. Mohammed. He's my partner. I've been working with him for almost a decade. He is a senior water policy analyst with the Central Arizona Project and a faculty associate with Arizona State University. He is involved in modeling current and future scenarios for the Colorado River Basin. Recently, he led an effort for his agency regarding a climate adaptation plan, basically looking at what you do with all the shortage, how do you share, that kind of things. Currently, he chairs the Water Utility Climate Alliance, which I'm part of it. So he's a chair of that big organization in the United States, basically providing water for almost 1 in 6 people in the United States. I'm greatly happy to having him, and then I'm gonna pass to Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Dr. Asif. I'm going to try to share my screen here and transition from these slides. Can everyone see the slides, hopefully?
Yes.
Perfect. So we're going to shift just a little bit, but still keep the Nile River Basin in mind. The goal here is to give you another experience, another history of another basin, prominent basin in the United States, where you'll soon realize there's a lot of similarities with the history of the Nile, as well as some of the same challenges, but we'll focus more on what happened in this basin, and hopefully maybe we can learn some of the lessons moving forward and apply it in the Nile River Basin. So the Colorado River Basin is huge basin in the western part of the United States. It covers 7 major states and also parts of the Republic of Mexico. And within the basin itself, there are 10 major reservoirs, 2 of which we will focus on. One is Lake Powell and Lake Mead, and each of them, collectively, I should say, store about 4 times the basin's annual flow, mean annual flow. Water generated by the basin serves 40 million people, both in the United States and Mexico, and serves and provides water to about 4 million acres of farmland and irrigation. And there's also a significant power generation capacity, about 10,000 gigawatt hours per year. When we think about the basin, it's really split into 2 portions. There's the upper basin, where 92% of annual flow is generated from snowmelt. So that may sound familiar already when you contrast it to the Nile. And then you have the lower basin, where actually most of the uses and consumptive uses exist. Mean annual flow ranges as high as 25 million acre feet and as low as 5 million acre feet, with the mean average being about 15 million acre feet. And I apologize for those of you that are thinking in cubic meters. Maybe Dr. Asefa can help me in the end with the conversions. So a little bit about the history of the basin. Really, in terms of a legal framework, that started in 1922 with the Colorado River Compact. And that's when the 7 basin states decided to come together to try to apportion the annual flow of the river. The lower basin is composed of Arizona, where I currently reside, California, which hopefully you're familiar, is a huge economic engine within the United States, and Nevada, where actually Lake Mead is situated. And once again, we'll talk about the reservoirs later. And then the upper basin, where flow is generated, is in the states of New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming. One of the things that they identified is the midpoint between the upper and lower basin splits those sub-basins is an area called Lee's Ferry. And what they did, using the 50 million acre feet annual flow, they said, well, half will be apportioned to the lower basin and half will be apportioned to the upper basin. Since water is generated in the upper basin from snowmelt, one of the stipulations is that in consideration of the fact that some years may have low flow, some years may have high flow, is that over a 10-year running period, the average of the flow going from the upper basin being received by the lower basin would not be lower than 7.5 million acre feet. So give or take, allowing give or take in case of low flow years. There was an issue though, and this is where you'll start to see further similarities, is the state of Arizona refused to ratify the compact and walked out of negotiations. And the main reason being is there was contention with inclusion of river tributaries in the lower basin. The lower basin tends to be more drier. Like I said, 92% of flow is occurring in the upper basin. And so they agreed, this agreement was that upper basin representatives said that the 7.5 million acre feet that the lower basin receives needs to also include water from these tributaries. Arizona disputed that. There was a breakdown in negotiations and Arizona walked out. Fast forward to 1928 is the Boulder Canyon Project Act. This is important because it authorized the construction of Hoover Dam, which created Lake Mead, which I'll talk about. It's a very important reservoir. It also apportioned the lower basin allocation of 7.5 million acre feet to the 3 different states. California received the lion's share at 4.4 because at that point in time, and you could argue still today, has the largest population, largest economic prosperity. Arizona, Nevada received lower portions. And then it also approved construction of a canal called the All-American Canal that helped to divert some of that Colorado River water deeper into California beyond just the boundary of the river itself. Remember, Arizona did not ratify, so they had no means, legal means as of yet to take their share. So they were even more unhappy about this development. Just as a side note, to bring in the international aspect of this, in 1944, the US-Mexico Water Treaty was signed. This guaranteed 1.5 million acre feet to be received by Mexico and established other metrics such as the maximum minimum deliveries to Mexico, where water would be delivered along the border, how water would be ordered, and so forth. So up until 1964, Arizona wasn't really utilizing its Colorado River water because they did not ratify the compact. During that time, because Arizona was not using its water, it's going to sound familiar, California started to use water in excess of its allocation and started to utilize the water that Arizona was not using. And in the US, this is somewhat permissible because of a legal concept called beneficial use, meaning first and how water is governed in the West under something called prior appropriation, which means first in use, first in right. Arizona decided to come back to the table because they realized they would need to utilize this water. And furthermore, most of Arizona's uses and population reside in central Arizona. So they would have to need to build a canal, an aqueduct, to divert water from the river itself towards the central portion of the state. And this would be called eventually the Central Arizona Project, the aqueduct itself physically. So Arizona finally ratified the compact to be able to receive its 2.8 million acre feet. California opposed this because that meant that if Arizona built this canal, California would have to reduce its allocation back to its original amount from the 1922 compact. So there was legal disputes there. Because of this back and forth, in 1952, Arizona decided to file legal suit against California so that they legally scale down to 4.4 so that Arizona can utilize its 2.8. So between 63 and 64, the Supreme Court deliberated and finally decided that, yes, Arizona does deserve its original 2.8 million acre feet, and California has to scale down back to 4.4, affirming the original allocations of the compact. This obviously would eventually lead to the development of the Central Arizona Project Canal to deliver water from the river to Central Arizona. And California vehemently opposed that because that definitely guaranteed that its allocation had to go down. So in '68, the Colorado Basin Project Act is what essentially authorized Arizona to construct the Central Arizona Project, that aqueduct, so that finally, at this point, all of the basin states and users were full participants of the Colorado River, much to California's chagrin. So ultimately, if we look at the basin today, this map, don't have to focus on it too much, but the idea is you begin to see there's a lot of diversions within the basin, both inside the basin and outside the basin. You'll notice several aqueducts deliver water to California, some out of the basin in Colorado, and then you can see the Central Arizona Project Canal. One thing I wanted to point out here is, as we mentioned, the lower basin established its allocations within its state, as well as Mexico, under hard numbers. However, the upper basin, you'll notice in this table, is based on percentages. Part of that is to allow flexibility so that if there's low flow years in the basin, upper basin states can still get their allocation even though there's not enough water being generated to provide them 7.5 million acre feet, while still guaranteeing the lower basin to get 7.5 million acre feet. So already there's that sort of perceived disparity, which you'll begin to notice is somewhat similar to some of the issues we have in the Nile. Two major reservoirs we talked about, Lake Mead, which we mentioned a few times. That's very important because that's where the lower basin receives its water supply from. So whatever's in that reservoir is what is released downstream to Arizona, California, and Nevada. The one upstream here is Lake Powell, actually serves another purpose. And this could be, you can draw probably potentially some similarities to the GERD or even the Rosaires Dam in Sudan, which is water pooled here helps to protect the upper basin states from curtailment, right? So if they're not able to provide on an average annual basis 7.5 million acre feet over 10 years, that means there comes a point where they actually have to reduce how much water they take to guarantee that water going downstream. So water that's pooled here is then discharged on an annual basis, sort of acting as a discharge reservoir, but has a huge capacity, both of them about 25 million acre feet. But it gives them that flexibility so that they don't have to experience curtailment, while Mead makes sure that there's enough water there to go downstream. One of the issues in the basin that comes to focus because of climate change is what happens when there is a shortage. How do we address shortage, especially in the lower basin? There's a document developed called the Interim Guidelines for the Management of Lake Mead. And what that does, it gives indication of how water is reduced to the lower basin based on declining reservoir elevations in Lake Mead. And they start at certain elevations, and as they progress lower, there's further reductions to the lower basin states. You'll notice Arizona and Nevada experience reduction. And as of 2012, through an addendum to the US-Mexico Treaty, Mexico receives a reduction. However, you'll quickly notice California does not take any reduction under these guidelines, which is the third lower basin state. And part of that is because of the concessions made during the dispute of California versus Arizona that enabled Arizona to build that Central Arizona Project Canal. California retained sort of senior priority rights. There's another issue that confounds this aspect of shortage and supply in the lower basin, which is something we're referred to as the structural deficit. In a normal year, when water is neither in surplus or decline or deficit, there is still about a net negative balance of 1.2 million acre feet in Lake Mead. So what that means is even when you have normal flow coming into Lake Mead from the upper basin, and you also have account for evaporative losses, the reservoir still declines about 1.2 million acre feet, which at its current elevation equates to about 12 feet. So that in itself is a given issue, so that even when things are normal, the reservoir declines. So that basically tells us we rely on high flow years to balance this situation out, but because of climate change, those high flow years are far and few in between. So what does that look like? This is a chart of 2000 to 2019. These are the elevations in Lake Mead. And as you can see, almost every year since 2000, the lake naturally declines, and all of those years are normal years, with the exception of 2011, where we had a high flow year. So naturally, the system declines because of the structural deficit, and this is what that looks like. One of the things that occurred over the last year is the development of something called the Drought Contingency Plan, DCP. And this was in recognition of the fact that Mead declines, we're fighting against climate change, and if Mead continues to decline to very extreme low levels within the shortage elevations, it becomes very difficult for the lake to recover, and the system could collapse. One of the key things about this plan is, on top of the shortage guidelines, all the lower basin states take additive reductions on top of that, some of which occur even before the first shortage elevation. Another thing that this plan does is now California, for the first time, is taking reductions with its lower basin peers, which is unprecedented, really. And the idea here is to protect Lake Mead. Yes, we're going to have dry years. Yes, we're still fighting climate change. But if we can mitigate the effect of those dry years on the reservoir, we can minimize the impact long-term so that the system does not collapse and we reach elevations that we can never recover from. Another thing is, once this is ratified, or essentially is, the expectation is Mexico will also start contributing voluntary additional reductions. And this is just a table showing you what that looks like. You'll see at 1090, which is above the first shortage trigger at 1075, we start to see these reductions. One last thing I wanted to talk about is the technical aspect of what we do in the system. And there's a computational model we use called the Colorado River Assimilation System that all the basin states use, and all of them have technical staff that can operate this model. And the purpose is, through this model, we're able to evaluate different scenarios, evaluate the impact of policy decisions, water use impact, climate change impacts in the sense of reductions to annual hydrologies, and test the system and see where we can try to implement water policy that can help benefit the system. So in summary, sorry, I was going pretty fast to help us get on track. Cooperative programs, funded programs like the DCP, can help address both these near-term risks of shortage and the long-term issues of climate change. And it requires all basin partners to participate to sustain the river supply. And collaboration is obviously a more effective approach to address issues than to fight. And you'll notice that in the Arizona versus California issue. Everyone eventually came back to the table, and once we're able to come back together, we can take care of small squabbles, but start to look at long-term issues. And really, because of this, the Colorado River Basin, I feel, is a very good model for other international basins to learn from in terms of surface water supply challenges. And it's also effectively done because of analytical tools and data that we have, not just available to us, but the fact that everyone is using it. We're all talking the same language and can therefore be very intelligent in our conversations on what to do with the basin. And I believe that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed. I really appreciate it. I think it's enlightening for all of us to see, this is a very complex system, and it takes a long time to do all these things and a very short time to present. Like I said, I wish we could have more time, but this is one of the things as we aspire, we're trying to bring different ideas to people. How does the learning from others, as well as looking at the facts, how we can improve this. So before I'm going to pass to Mr. Sampson for the questions. I just want to thank everyone today, joining us. I tried to set up a big picture in terms of it may go against some of the people thinking that our problem is actually we need more dam, and in a sense, because of all the issues we show. And then looking at cooperative, the science is telling us. And we heard also with Dr. Yehedo, the Professor Yehedo, regarding the framework and legals. That's important in order to use the science and other aspects. We need to have that legal framework. Dr. Ahmed gave us a great presentation in terms of the historical accounting of the Nile Basin, and not only what has happened, but what he thinks is a vision. I really like his vision, one summary slides, and probably I will print that and put it as a picture wall. And then I really like that in the sense that that's the way to go forward. Following that, we also heard with Mr. Fakah Ahmed, great accounting of what's going on with this, at least from the Eastern Nile perspective. I think there was a lot of things you guys have done, and there is a lot to be done. And I believe that all of us has learned quite a bit from that presentation as well. Later on, sometimes we didn't get too much of the science, but I also appreciate Dr. Mogus explaining us some of the sensitivities. You know, at the end of the day, we need to know the hydraulics, we need to know the nitty-gritty things to get to the policy level and make a decision. That's where we have to appreciate not just the science, but also to see how we can translate. Of course, the last one with Dr. Mohammed was a great explanation how others also face this kind of issues. So we are not alone in a sense. People living in the Nile Basin are not the only one. We have many examples, and today we heard great example. What I like from what they have done in Arizona, in general, Nile Basin, Colorado Basin, was that how they came at the end together, how they share some of the drought, and what they're doing now to counter droughts or change in stream flow and so on. That's huge for our case, maybe flooding, maybe other things. But I hope that we get enough information to be able for the viewers to further more. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it to my colleague from We Aspire, Mr. Samson Tefera.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of We Aspire, I want to thank all of you, especially those of you in a different time zone. We really appreciate it. Dr. Turuso, it's an outstanding summary that you gave us. We received a lot of questions, and we don't have much time left to get to all the questions. I'll randomly pick a couple of questions, but while I have all of you here, it would be great if we can have a Q&A session next time with the same speakers. We have enough questions to circulate and kind of, initiate a question. So I'm gonna challenge Dr. Turuso to reassemble the same panelists, and we'll add more questions, and then we'll have a Q&A session. So I wanna put that on your radar. So the first question, in fact, Turuye, I wanna give it to you. If the Nile provides sufficient water flow, why is it an issue? Why does conservation goes into this picture? You're on mute.
Okay, so there is enough water in a sense that the issue, even with the climate change, what we are seeing is the variability. That's huge. I know that from our work, we see increasing temperature, but in terms of the rainfall, that variability means it's either, like I said, a famine or it's a flooding. So that means that we need to be able to take care of those variabilities. So to me, there is a hope. There is enough water, still. And I would also agree with my colleague here, Dr. Sammu, what he said, that it was easy to agree 50 years ago, maybe even easy today. It will be difficult later on because of all the uses changing. In terms of the uses, for example, some of our work for municipal water, irrigation, everybody knows. Irrigation is going to increase and so on. But some of my work, our work at least that I am familiar, is in terms of water use for urban, it's going to triple. So by 2050, we are looking at urban areas needing water for supply much more than 300 to 400%. We also analyzed, and also at least there are some ways to provide, how can you save, even with urban water. So there are things to do from agriculture water saving, and then from urban water saving as well. So I'm hopeful. I think what we have for today is more of a management and willingness of in the Nile Basin rather than the source itself. So I will stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turuso. Another question came from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, from one of our members, Magdalawit Derbe. It is directed to Professor Zarai, to another We Aspire member. So this is good. Where do you think discussion can start, reconcile seemingly reconcilable starting point, case in point, the 1959 agreement?
Thank you. I don't think the 1959 agreement would be the starting point to develop a basin-wide cooperative agreement in the Nile Basin for several reasons. The 1959 agreement was signed and ratified by 2 downstream riparian countries. Thereby, they apportioned the Nile waters between the 2 of them. So this has nothing to do with the upstream Nile Basin countries. Of course, Egypt and Sudan might argue that this establishes an existing water use rights, and they might also support this argument on the basis of colonial treaties that favor downstream countries. However, from upstream countries' perspective, these practices are contrary to modern principles of international law, such as the principle of equitable and reasonable use, cooperation, sovereign equality, and the likes, and therefore not valid and applicable to the others. And I would add to that even Sudan and Egypt recognize the modern principles of international water law that are directly in conflict with previous agreements that ignore the interests of other upstream countries. So for example, the bilateral agreements signed between Ethiopia and Sudan, between Ethiopia and Egypt, recognize some of the fundamental principles of international water law. The Declaration of Principles contained the key principles of international water law that completely rejects the old thinking. And thirdly, there was a general consensus in the negotiations of the Nile Basin Initiative, which was supposed to be leading to the adoption of the Cooperative Framework Agreement, that Nile waters must be managed based on basic principles of international water law. Even if one looks into the recent submissions by these 3 countries to the UN Security Council, and in particular the Sudanese submission, they clearly recognize the principle of equitable and reasonable use. They recognize the duty to prevent significant harm. They recognize the principle of cooperation, the principle of notification and consultation. These are based on modern principles of international law. So this leads us to say that the negotiations, the discussions must start around the issues involving the CFA, the Cooperative Framework Agreement. And this has to do with the notion of water security, which is very divisive, and also the details of notification and consultation. So around this, a discussion must start to address the concerns of both downstream and upstream countries. And both sides must learn hard lessons from the GERD negotiations. What do they get if they continue through the current trends based on unilateralism? what do they get if they change this, if they change course toward this basin wide approach and cooperation? Perhaps that can lead them to realize that the best way forward is to cooperate at the basin level.
Thank you, Professor Zarai, and thank you for making your answer brief. The next question I'm going to direct it to Dr. Osman. It was directed to you from Burhanu Taye. He asks, please help me understand why Sudan, which can be spared from floods, get regulated flow of water year-round and can expand its irrigation projects, is not signing up for a CFA and complain about the GERD. You're on mute.
For the CFA, there are only 3 points or 3 articles that people are not agreeing on, or at least Sudan and Egypt are not agreeing on. This is one of them is prior notification. It is not put as hard as it is in the UN law, yeah, the 1997 agreement or framework agreement. And the other thing is the consensus that decisions should not be taken by voting, that the decisions should be taken by consensus, so that and this is how the NBI have been working on, acting on consensus, because the 2 downstream countries, or the 2 countries at the tail of the river, fear that maybe they will be in a bad situation if the upstream countries agreed on something, if they want, because of their dependence. This situation. And the third thing is about the environmental flow and something like that. Sorry, about what they call water security. The water security, how to understand the water security. What will be the situation of the current use of the water, and how are they going to withstand that, keep that one. And especially for Sudan, there is a potential of expanding in the irrigation system. I think if the thinking was going in the direction of joint projects instead of trying to apportion water, why not the countries should start thinking, and this is not very clear in the CFA. The countries should be working together so that they can build, as in my presentation, I talked about poverty. That is the main on the poverty issue, and try to work together. And I talked about crop zoning, and I called things, and even my friend talked about that as well. Why not in the CFA people are talking about? This is one of the difficulties that we face when we talk to the legal people. The legal people are always talking about rights and shares and something like that. For us, the technical would like to ignore, to a certain extent, political borders and try to think regionally, that let us use this water. And the example I gave very quickly is the difference between, if you are invited, do you want to go for a buffet type of invitation? Sharing of water. Buffet, you take what you need, as much as you need, and you reject the other. But the buffet, the cocktail, you are given a certain amount, whether you like it or not. So if we can think in that direction, I think if the spirit of the CFA, I have been there, I think it will be more useful. So let us hope that we go into that direction. Let us have the political will from our leaders so that they can really think of We have been hammering this all the time, but with not much of success. We have heard it from Dr. Abi Ahmed to our Hamdok, but this is talk. This is very good, but we would like action on working together about how much water are going to get. Let us forget about the amount of projects that you should have, and let us think regionally. I think if we can go in that direction, the solution will be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Osman. I'm trying to get to everybody and then ask some of the question here. Next question is going to go to Mr. Rafaq Ahmed. The question is, can you provide more information on the details of flood forecasting and early warning and dam safety that ENTRO is working on? Do you use specific model for flood forecasting and early warning?
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, flood is a very major issue in the Eastern Nile. It affects all the three countries, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Sudan. This work is being done for the last 8 years. During rainy season, we bring forecasters from the three countries. They are stationed in intro during the rainy season for 3 months. And they do the forecasting, and then they provide the authorities with a forecast result, with 3-day lead time. And it happens is that Intro is the only institution who is currently doing the forecasting as well as early warning. We use different models for different countries because the countries have their own models, and then we have to harmonize our model with what they are using. But now we are again discussing with the countries so that we can have a harmonized model. So we use similar model, WRF model for Ethiopia and South Sudan, but for Sudan, they have special model. So we are using the Sudanese model at the current time. But now we are working on a unified model for the three countries so that we can provide support, and also we develop their capacity. In terms of dam safety, we start again working on dam safety since 2013, and we developed various manuals and the toolkits, as well as we developed capacity of the countries. And we also provide a lot of training, and then we developed institutional mechanism. Currently, Ethiopia, Sudan, and South Sudan, they have a dam safety unit within the ministries in charge of dam safety. And actually in Ethiopia, it was established at the level of a directorate. So we are providing, not only technical training, but hands-on training. They go to specific dams and they do the dam safety assessment. And by the way, the dam safety manual and the guideline we developed for the Eastern Nile is currently being considered by ICOLD, the International the Commission on Large Dams for Development Countries. So, and it happens that our dam safety coordinator is, due to this Intro's engagement in dam safety, is currently serving as Vice President of the ICOLD. So this is actually, we are proud of what we are doing. And then now we are moving along that, we are moving into coordinated operation of cascade dams. We have cascade dams on the Tekeze, we have cascade dams on the Blue Nile. Some of the dams are going to be over year storage. If we don't coordinate their operation, then countries may not actually get the benefits they are expecting out of, or the optimum benefit they should get. Now, currently, we are moving along with dam safety into coordinated operation of cascade dams. So those are the answers actually I can provide now.
Thank you.
If you give me your address, I can give you the specific types of model we are using for flood forecasting.
Sure, we have your email address and then we'll get it. With Dr. Turuso, do we have time to take a couple more questions?
Yes, I think for the others, and then
sure.
Yeah.
My goal is to hit every presenter. So there are a lot of questions came for Professor Zarai. So like I said, if we can propose to have a Q&A session in the future, really, it would be a good discussion. I intentionally avoided questions directed at Egypt because we don't have a presenter from Egypt here. So in all fairness, hopefully in the future, we'll have somebody from Egypt to present. And the next question, I'm going to direct it to Dr. Mohammed. The question is, California essentially had to learn to live with less. Is there any lesson to draw from their experience for the downstream countries? But equitable and reasonable use of the Nile water would necessarily require these dominant users to use less than that they are accustomed to, just like California. Great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what I hinted at, but I didn't have enough time to really get into the details of, is California's decisions and the fact that it had to live with less was really driven by legal frameworks. Initially, their overuse of their allocation, with Arizona using less and Arizona coming back to the table, required the intervention of the Supreme Court, the largest court in the United States. So initially, it was rough. You know, it wasn't a seamless activity. But once that was out the way and we moved forward and started to look beyond the small squabbles and issues and started to look long-term and see the impacts of climate change affecting the water supply that's available to us in the near term and even short term, looking further into the future, California realized that they had a stake, because once again, there's still even legal implications in that there's a stipulation in the interim guidelines, which tells us when and how shortage is declared in the basin, where if Lake Mead drops to a level so low, deep into the third shortage tier, there is a stipulation where the Secretary of the Interior, who acts as the water master in the basin, can step in and say there's not enough water resources for all the high priority users to receive their water. He or she at that point in time can decide to, in a sense, redistribute the available water to the most important uses outside of the given priority system. Now, when water is that low in the basin, in the reservoir, there's only enough water to satisfy the state of California. I think at 1,000 feet elevation, there's only 4.5 million acre feet. And I believe that even includes dead pool in the reservoir. So realistically, you can't come to a point and say, California, you get all of the water, Nevada doesn't get water, Arizona doesn't get water. And just to think in economic and socioeconomic sense, that means you're cutting off water to the city of Las Vegas, which, you know, some of you may know for good or for bad, or the city of Phoenix, right? So there's major metropolitan cities that would completely lose Colorado River supply just to satisfy the state of California. So that's not realistic, right? So I think California realized that, and so it became in their benefit to also take proactive measures, to take those reductions that they never had to take, just so we don't reach that point. Because if we get to that point, the states and the basin state representatives now lose control over their destiny, lose control over making decisions of how they receive that water. Because once that stipulation is hit, the secretary can come in, and what he or she does at that point of time, we don't know, and we have no control over. So it's a way to still, you know, we suffer equally somewhat, but we have more control in our situation, even in this negative sense.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. I think the last person we have on the panel that did not receive a question is Dr. Samu. I would ask the question, if the Nile provides sufficient water flow, why is it an issue? Why not the downstream countries invest in the conservation of resources in the upstream countries to sustain long-term water flow? If freshwater is new oil, why is it not managed as such with sufficient funding and organization?
Thank you very much. I think one of the challenges of whether we have sufficient water or not is that the accounting system, the water accounting and auditing system in the Nile Basin is very poor. We don't know how much we have. Our monitoring system is very poor. And at the same time, we don't have similar protocols of measurement of hydrological data in the basin. It has to do also with transparency and trust building among the nations. You know, you can find closed stations in the Nile Basin whereby you can have different gauge readings between, you know, very close gauge stations located, but managed by different countries. So huge difference in terms of that kind of, you know, not having similar protocols. And significant part of the basin is not gauged. So I think where they can build trust is that the first thing, I think I concur with what always we say, like Ato Faki Ahmed said, the first thing is a confidence building joint project has to be initiated. That could guide even institutions to form. Without having a joint project as a confidence building, it's very difficult to account how much water we have. How can, for example, in this western part of southern Sudan, where there is huge rainfall, the flow that's contributed to Nile is, the flow that's generated is close to 11 billion, but that's contributed to the Nile is 0.5 billion. One can say, okay, we cannot disturb the ecosystem, but we can develop hydropower upstream of that water loss area. So you can develop, you know, energy, but without interrupting the flow of Nile, so that the swamp is not being affected. There are different options and mechanisms that we can, you know, tap excess water in the Nile Basin. But of course, on top of everything is to be transparent and think that the resource is one resource for all of us. I think that's what I can say. There is one question, I'm sorry to say, there is how much percentage of the Ethiopian Nile is Ethiopian water, it says in one of the questions. I can quickly interject. Nile flow, total Nile flow from Ethiopian highlands is 70% of the total flow of the country, or renewable flows, which means almost 30% of the country, in the west of the country, generates almost 70% of the flow, whereas 70% of the country generates only 30% of the flow, the renewable water resource of the country, which means there are big river basins in Ethiopia, but apparently when compared to the Nile flow, they are really 1/3 of the whole 10 or 9, I think 9 river basins contribute less than 30% when compared to the total Nile flow. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to get to your questions, we promise you with the same panels, we're going to come back with part 2, a Q&A session. And on behalf of We Aspire, for those who followed us and watched this live, and for the panelists, I want to thank all of you, you know, sincerely. We're hoping to see you soon in a similar program. I want to pass the mic to Dr. Teruso, who's the person who organized this and pulled this panel together in a very short time notice. Please bring this meeting to a close. Thank you, Dr. Teruso.
Thank you. And I guess I got an assignment, so now I have something else to do. I would like to thank every one of you, the panelists, and I understand, for example, with Mr. Fakahmed today, he just 5 minutes ago, he joined us after traveling. All of you, I think you took this and then prepared and, come up with something that's very useful for everyone. So I really appreciate your time. And above all, I would like to thank behind the scene my colleagues at We Aspire making this happen. As Mr. Tafara said, we promise that we can come back next time. And thank you, everyone. And everyone who has a question, please send them and we'll contact you. We have the contact of the panelists. If you have additional follow-up, like Mr. Fakahmed said, for example, please send it to us and then we'll direct. Thank you so much and have a great weekend and good night for some of you. It's too late for you. We appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you.